El instituto ha tocado la vida de más de 127,000 líderes en más de 930 organizaciones. Es miembro de la Junta Ejecutiva Global de Charter for Compassion. Ha escrito varios libros, entre ellos Administrar desde el Corazón y el libro One Wholesome World. Tratan sobre liderar y gobernar desde un espacio de integridad y compasión. Él es cofundador de la ONG Pragati Foundation, Fundación para la Paz y el Liderazgo Compasivo. Le damos la bienvenida vía electrónica. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Gard, it's all yours.
Mis hermanos y hermanas, este día es muy bonito. Mi nombre es Francisco, a.k.a. Paco. Cristina es mi hermana. Canciones es muy hermoso, ¿sí? Sí. Mi español es no grande, bastante para comida. Este día, mi amigo Arun Waklu from Pune, India. Arun, welcome. Can you say a word? I will channel him. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. There you are,
Yeah.
Arun. Welcome.
Yes.
Welcome, my friend.
Yes. Muchas gracias.
Arun.
Yes.
You being a teacher of ancient wisdom from India, could you lead us in a meditation to get us started?
Sure, Gard. Thank you. I'll do that, and just give me a moment. I will do precisely that. So, a very hearty good morning to everyone, to my brothers and sisters here. And as we say in Spanish, buenos días, queridas hermanos y hermanas. I'm delighted to be here with you, and greetings from India. So as Brother Gard has suggested, we will do a small meditation. So I invite you to please shut your eyes, close your eyes, and just relax in the moment. Just relax in the moment and take a deep breath in and a breath out, and keep your spine straight. And just allow any sounds, any sensations, any feelings or thoughts to just pass by like clouds. And you are like the sky of peace, witnessing all these clouds go by. Just enjoy this moment, be in this moment, and remind yourself that I am infinite peace. As we sit in silence at a time when the world needs peace, let us remember that our deepest core is infinite peace. I would like to share a small prayer from India and then hand it back to God. And the prayer is very simply, Asato ma sadgamya, tamaso ma jyotirgamya, mrityor ma amrutam gamya. And what it means is, from ignorance, lead me to truth, from darkness, lead me to light, and from death, lead me to immortality. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, peace. God, over to you.
Arun, thank you so much. And for those of you that don't know, Shanti means the peace, infinite peace, the peace that passes all understanding. And so in these times, We're all concerned about the lack of peace. We're concerned about the Middle East. We're concerned about Ukraine and Russia. We're concerned about Africa, Sudan. We're concerned about the violence in our own backyards, in our own streets. And so I would like to ask you now, Arun, if you could speak to what is the root cause to this quality of violence and polarization that we see in our world today?
Right, God. Thank you for your question. Friends, the root cause of polarization and violence in the world is simply we have lost touch with the profound universal spirit of humanity, of life that runs every single breath of ours. We seem to have forgotten this fundamental unity that is the very source of our life. We identify with the false sense of a self. I'm a Christian, or I'm a Hindu, or I'm a Palestinian, or I'm Spanish, or an Israeli, forgetting that we are all one humanity. And let me just tell you a little story. I'd love to tell you a little story from India, and the story is called The Salt Doll. It's a very, very beautiful story, and I'd love to share it with you. So a little doll made of salt was roaming around in the desert, very, very, very tired. And suddenly it saw the shimmering, beautiful, silvery thing of the ocean. And it asked the ocean, who are you? Who are you? And the ocean said, come near me, I'll tell you who I am. And so the little salt doll went forward towards the ocean, and suddenly a wave came and her feet dissolved. And when her feet dissolved, she said, but who are you? What's this? What happened to my feet? And then the doll went a little more, and the ocean said, come nearer, I'll tell you who I am. And a wave came and dissolved the whole doll. And as she was melting into the ocean, she said, I know who you are. I am you, and you are me. And friends, this is the truth of life. This is exactly how our life is. We're not a salt doll with a separate identity, but we are the whole ocean. We are the ocean of humanity. And when we think of ourselves as a limited wave, a limited doll, a limited entity, the ego, it leads to not okayness, passivity, helplessness. It leads to a lust for power, over domination, like a person whose eyes are covered and says, it's dark in here. Wherever I look, it's dark. It's dark, but it's not dark. My eyes are shut. And that's the whole thing. And we're not awake to the power and beauty of the ocean. Now, friends, just look around this beautiful auditorium for a minute. Just turn your heads and look around at the beautiful people here. Now, all the molecules that make up our bodies and all of life have come from the same sun 4.6 billion years ago. All the same atoms, the same molecules, the same sun. And now if you take a deep breath, the argon atoms that you just breathed were exactly the same argon atoms that Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, and Mother Teresa breathed in their whole lifetime. The same argon atoms. So we forget the infinite ocean of peace and love that we are right now. I think my own journey, my own life journey illustrates this. For nearly 60 years, I struggled with judgments, with a deep sense of not okayness, and a search for perfection. Always perfection was out there. It was never here. And I never lovingly accepted myself. I judged myself, judged other people, judged life. And there was suffering. There was a lot of suffering. There was no love. Where there's judgment, there is no love. And one day, by the grace of life, this ended. And I understood that everything is love. Every bit of life is love. I forgave myself. I forgave others. And I now remember that all of life is love dancing. It is perfect. And as we say in India, that is Shiva's dance is all there is. But then you might say, hey, if everything is love dancing, why is there war? Well, the reason that darkness happens is because it is a reminder for us to look at the opposite, which is light, to stay focused on the light of peace and love and joy, and to work together to be it, see it, and to free it. And friends, this is the time to co-create heaven on earth, a world of compassion, joy, peace, and abundance that works for all. God,
Beautiful.
over to you.
Beautiful. So
Thank you, thank you.
I have the privilege of being a professor at the University of Nevada. And in the first week of my classes, I tell my students in philosophy, this is really a game show. Door number 1 is anger, fear, and anxiety. Door number 2 is love, joy, and peace. You have been swindled. You've been taught to believe that door number 1 is where you will live your life. But door number 2 is your birthright. It is what you were born to. So Arun, as an educator, what would you say, and we have many educators and students in the room here this morning, as an educator, what would you say the most important thing for a student to walk away from their education with?
Okay, wonderful. So I think, God, the most important thing is for us to understand that we are not this salt doll, we are not this ego, as we say, we're not a limited identity. That's not who we really are. We're not the ego. In fact, the ego is really the real culprit. It's a false sense of who I am. It's a false identity. And if you look at the word a self, it anagrams into false. That's not who I am. Who I really am is profound silence and peace and awareness. And the biggest thing I would tell a student is to meditate, to take time to be still, take time to pause, to live in the now, not get stuck in the ego, and through meditation, to understand that the past is history. Guilt and regrets and grievances and sadness and bitterness is of the past. And future, the unease, the anxiety, the tension, the stress and worry and all forms of fear are coming from the future. But friends, our life is happening in the now. This is where our life is. This is where peace is, joy is, action is. And so meditation, God, is what I would tell them. I would say that please take time to be still. Please take time to pause. And an easy way to come into the now is to watch your breathing. Watch the inflow and outflow of your breathing like we did at the start of our session just now. Watch your breathing and then ask yourself, who is witnessing the breathing? Who's watching the breathing? Who is watching the inflow and outflow of breath? And when you ask this question, it takes you into a beautiful space of silence and peace and awareness and compassion and emptiness. And this is who we are, friends. We are precisely this infinite silence, infinite peace, infinite awareness, compassion, and emptiness. And meditation reminds us that, hey, this is who you are. You're not your body, you're not your mind, you're not your religion, you're not your nationality, you're not your organization, you're pure space of silence, peace, awareness, compassion, emptiness. So friends, I would, God, coming back to your question, I would request people to pause. I would say, take time to pause. Several times a day, maybe just 2 minutes a day, remind yourself of who you are. Just 2 minutes is enough. 2 minutes, several times a day, take a pause, take a pause. And the benefits of pause are humongous, are huge. It's a reminder of who we really are. It reminds us that compassion is who we are. It reminds us of the ocean. We don't get stuck in the salt doll notion of who we are. But hey, we are life. We are life. And life is love in full expression. That's who we are. That's who we are. And this, I think, is what I would tell educators, I would tell students to remember this, Because if we don't do this and we stay in the head and we stay in the mind and we never think of the space beyond the mind, we are not going to get very far. It's just not going to get very far. So I think just to summarize, I would say remembering that mindfulness, being present, meditation is extremely important for people to connect with this source of power and beauty within themselves. I would also add two other things that help young people to find their life purpose. What exactly is their heart calling you to do? I mean, I, excuse me, trained as an electrical engineer from the Indian Institute of Technology. Then I studied management, but my heart was calling me to teach, to meditate and teach other people. That's what I did. I followed my bliss. As Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss and it will take you to where you need to be. So that is at the individual level, Guard. And at the collective level, I would say connect with people who resonate with you, who resonate with your vibration, connect with them, converse with them, co-create with them. Like as part of Compassionate Pune in India, we've got teachers together who are competing with each other, are now connecting, conversing, co-creating, they're sharing knowledge with each other. Organic farmers are talking to consumers. Children are visiting farms where their food comes from. And people in Pune, about 220 people who are connected with mental health, are all collected as a community. And children in India are talking to children in Pakistan, Indonesia, and other countries as part of Youth Collaborating for Compassion. So I would tell educators, connect with EMV, connect with the Charter for Compassion, Foundation for Peace and Compassionate Leadership. Connect with anybody whose heart resonates to love, and connect, converse, and co-create, and leverage your unique gifts. So that's what I would tell educators, Guard. Yes, and one other thing, very important, I have to set an example. I think the most important thing in education is that peace is not taught, it is caught. You can't teach peace, but you can catch peace. So when a teacher is loving, unconditionally accepting, unconditionally present, I think the children get that love, get the peace, and that's what is the real transforming magic. Yes, sir.
Well, that was beautiful, Arun. I'm going to give him a round of applause.
Yes.
So, Arun,
am I audible, Guard?
You preempted my next question by, we say you can tell people what fishing is like, or you can take them fishing. Yeah. And Arun just took you fishing. So you've learned a very practical way in which to bring that quality of peace, which will bring peace to the world in harmony. So I will tell you, right, educators, at the beginning of every class that I teach at the university, I always begin with 3 minutes of silence. Now that has two benefits. One, they're learning how to meditate, but two, it elevates the conversation. Their hearts expand and their minds expand as they meditate just for 3 minutes of silence. It's really profound. I've seen it without it, meditation, and I've seen it with meditation. Meditation works.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So, Arun, thank you so much. Now I want to go to our last question, which is, give us all an image, and I was going to say 100 years, but I don't think many of us will be around in 100 years. So let's say 30 or 40 years.
Sure.
What is your vision of this planet?
Sure, but just before that, with your permission, I'll just share one slide about teachers, and that is that, as I said, peace cannot be taught. It is something that is caught. Just as if a person is feeling very cold, on a cold wintry night, person is feeling cold, it's not going to help if I show him a PowerPoint picture of fire. I say, hey, okay, you're feeling cold, no problem. Well, here's a beautiful thing called fire and have a look at it. It's not going to work. It will just not work. I have to be on fire myself. And only when I am on fire, the fire of peace and love, will the children and others catch it? And thanks for your lovely question about the world. I'll be very happy to answer that. So may I invite us all to just shut our eyes for a minute. Just, if we can all just close our eyes for a minute and just make this sound of ah. Can you just fill the whole hall in Monterrey, Mexico? Fill the whole hall with the sound of ah. Let's do that, everyone. Just make this loud sound. Ah. I don't hear anything. Is it happening, Guard?
It's so beautiful.
Okay, thanks. So the reason I said this is the sound of the heart. This is a sound that brings us back into the heart. And it is from that space that I would like to respond to the last question that Guard has posed, that how do I see the world in 30 years from now? A person called Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, someday after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for life the energies of love. And then for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. And friends, I believe totally and completely that starting 2023, 24, slowly more and more people will awaken to the truth. All over the world, people will awaken to the truth. They will awaken to the reality of how we have been fooled for many years by the ego, by the powers that be, and so on. And we've lost touch with our intrinsic power. And this awakening will manifest in health care, education, governance, economics. It will become more localized, more beautiful, more homely, more direct, and it will be subservient to life. Now, there is a lot of hope on the planet. I mean, for example, 500 communities, compassionate cities all over the world have put compassion as their North Star. Austin, Texas, Las Vegas, Monterrey, Mexico, Pune, India, and so on. I mean, so many have done it already. In Pune, where 10 years ago principals were competing with each other, fighting with each other, they're now thriving. They're vying with each other to share and learn. Compassionate Australia is emerging. Compassionate USA, compassionate India is emerging. And about 38 years ago, I and a friend started a movement called Education Today, Society Tomorrow, and thousands of teachers are waking up to love all over India, waking up to compassion, waking up to how can we make our schools joyful. We have a beautiful program called Joyful Schools Program. And let's not talk about mental illness, let's talk about joy. So Africa is waiting, USA, Australia is where all this will go. So just to summarize the question that response, I think the wisdom that we have in the world is huge, whether it is the work of a Thich Nhat Hanh or an Osho or so many masters, so many people have written so much. So there is no dearth of wisdom. The real challenge is to walk the talk, to meditate, to get in touch with things, to remember that all of humanity has the same spirit going through it. And that, friends, is the same spirit that kept Mother Teresa alive, that kept Jesus alive. The same Holy Spirit is keeping us alive right now. Every one of us is that Holy Spirit. So that is what we have to remember. We have to remember, and of course, as they say in Africa, we have to remember you are I and I am you, and we are one because of each other. So, Guard, I am very hopeful. I'm very I mean, with the kind of 1,800 people sitting in the audience, and all of us all over the world, there's so many good people happening, so much good out there that I'm hopeful that we will co-create a world of joy, peace, and abundance for all. Amen. And I know it's going to happen. And thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. And I'm sure it's going to happen.
Arun, thank you.
Thanks.
So to use a wonderful word from Sanskrit, I would have you turn to your neighbor and say, Namaste, Namaste, which means I salute the very highest within you, the God dwelling within you. So namaste. Namaste, Arun. Thank you so much for your time.
God. Namaste to everyone.
And stay on for just a second. So what I gather from you today is that only one thought separates us from world peace, and that is that we are separate. And if we could...
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like we think we're a wave, but actually we're the ocean.
We are the ocean. And I will tell you that in my classroom, professors and professoras, after I tell them this is a game show, door number 1, fear, anxiety, and anger, door number 2, love, joy, and peace, then I tell them in the very first week of their class, now you have your first examination. And the question is, which door do you want? Do you want door number 1, fear, anxiety, and anger? Or do you want door number 2, love, joy, and peace? And by the way, don't raise your hand on door number 1. Just see me after class. We need to talk. So Arun, thank you so much for your time. Namaste, my friend. God bless you.
Namaste, namaste. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. God, yeah.
And now we go to a friend, I believe, who is now in Israel. His name is Thomas Hubble. And Thomas Hubble is probably one of the leading traumatologists on the planet. Anybody here experienced trauma? Raise your hand. We all experience trauma. And Thomas is going to take us on a journey to explore a little bit of what this word really means in its deepest ways. So Thomas, welcome, welcome, welcome. Bienvenidos. Shalom.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Thomas, right now you're sitting probably in your apartment there in Israel, and tell us a little bit of what's going on and what you're doing there in Israel right now.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that it might be possible that throughout our time, sometimes during the day, we have missile attacks, so we need to go to a shelter. That's why I'm sitting not in my regular office, but in a more safer environment. And yes, I'm on the one hand living here, although I travel a lot already for 10 years, and I'm doing at the moment a lot of deep trauma relief support for different organizations, different very traumatized parts of the population here after what happened 3 weeks ago or in the last 3 weeks. So I'm pretty engaged in developing very good holding environments for very traumatized citizens. So that's what I'm doing here. And so in case during the presentation an alarm goes off, I will need to go to a shelter for 2-3 minutes just that everybody is prepared. So, but that's the reality here. Talking about world peace and world and war. So we're looking to practice exactly what has been mentioned before, like how we hold that space, how we are that space within a lot of atrocities. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
Beautiful. And I have taken several of your classes, and I recommend his classes to all of you. But you have helped me to appreciate that trauma occurs on 3 different levels: personal, somebody rear-ended my car; collective, trauma, pandemic; and intergenerational or genetic trauma. Could you share with us your wisdom on those 3 levels of trauma?
Yeah, I'm happy to. First, let's say, what is trauma? Trauma is the response in our bodies and nervous systems and psyches in relation or within very overwhelming experiences. It's very important. So some people think trauma is what happened to me. And when we talk about trauma more professionally, we're saying it's the trauma response that happens in us within very adverse situations. That means, first of all, the trauma response is a very intelligent function that life grew over tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. So it's supposed to keep us alive, to keep us surviving better. And I believe trauma is the underlying reason for feeling separate. That we think that we are separate, but we also often feel separate. And the reason why we feel separate is because all of us have been born into a world that was already traumatized when we came here. So we started off being born into a system where trauma, often unconsciously, is part of our world. And so when we look at trauma, we see three sets of symptoms. One is that, and that's often what we experience when we get triggered, is that we are very stressed, that we are overreacting. The other side, though, is that trauma is able to shut down a lot of pain, and we become numb, we become distant, we become disengaged. So that set of symptoms doesn't look like a trigger, but it is a big trigger too. So some people, when they get triggered, we become disengaged and we basically pull out of the relationship to the world and to people around us. And I think the third set of symptoms is there is a crack, there's two. Suddenly there's two, us and them, me and the one that is threatening me. There is two-ness, that's the beginning of othering, that's the beginning of fragmentation of societies and democracies, and that's, in a way, the sense of feeling separate. And that's why I think understanding that there is individual trauma that can be related to our biography. These are things that we went through either as children or as grown-ups that were simply very hurtful. And we need to take that trauma response serious and find the appropriate support, because we are actually exploring intelligence, not shortcomings when we look at trauma. So that's one thing. But then, as you beautifully said, there are two other dimensions of trauma that we often don't take in account. One is that we have been born into a family system where our parents, often our grandparents, great-grandparents, went through wars, displacement, all kinds of adversities themselves. So there's intergenerational trauma. And there are more and more epigenetic signs that how trauma is being epigenetically transmitted from one generation to the next. More and more scientific studies coming up. And then, of course, so there's intergenerational trauma, and trauma is like an echo through the generations. And the third part is collective or systemic trauma. The world that we have been born into was already traumatized to start with, more or less. Some areas or some parts of the population, of course, more and others less. But there is a systemic agreement around trauma because we often normalize those systemic effects like fragmentation, racism, anti-Semitism, gender violence, you name it, many the after effects of colonialism, the after effects of genocides. There's a lot of fragmentation and friction and social or political issues that I think are missed out trauma symptoms on a societal level. And so, but these three levels are not separate. There's this and that and that. It's one system. So individual trauma, ancestral trauma, collective trauma are one trauma system. And that's why I think we need to do our own healing or integration work on all these three levels. And the beauty of trauma healing is that whatever we can heal and integrate back into life heals the two-ness, gets unified, leads to post-traumatic learning, leads to ethical learning, leads to an upgrade of our capacity to relate to each other, to learn from the past, and to stop as Sigmund Freud in Vienna already said, like that trauma is subject to the repetition compulsion. And I think we all know when there are symptoms in our life or patterns or relational patterns that are recurrent. We had the same argument with our wife or our husband over and over again. We have similar experiences over and over again. We see wars over and over again. That's the repetition compulsion of unconscious trauma. And so that works on a personal level, on an ancestral level. We see ancestral patterns in family systems coming back, health issues and mental health issues and conflicts. And we see collective repetition compulsion. And that's why, and I think we will talk in a minute about it, that's why I think it's not only a possibility, I think it's even our responsibility as citizens to do what we can do, because there's maybe a limit to what we can do, but to do what we can do collectively to reduce the after effects of trauma for our own well-being, for public health, but for the next generations, that the next generations have less trauma echo that they walk into and have more possibilities in life, have much more access to deeper states of peace, deeper states of compassion, global collaboration, all the things I think that we need in our world right now.
Beautiful, Thomas. Thank you so much. So I often turn to my wife and I say, we have the privilege of being cycle breakers. We can begin to break the cycle of trauma. And I think that is the privilege that each of us in this auditorium have. And I will just share with you, in Compassionate Las Vegas, we have circles of trust from kindergarten through high school, where the children are allowed to sit in a circle and share their deepest emotions of what they're grateful for, of what's on their heart, what's concerning them, where reconciliation is required. And it's 1 hour each week. And every time I go, tears come to my eyes as I observe these children working through and breaking the cycle of trauma. So Thomas, could you share with us for a moment how love, compassion, and hope are related to trauma?
Yeah, first of all, the good news is that we all, exactly what you just said right now, the good news is that we all have the superpowers to heal trauma. We all can be relational in resonant, attuned relationships, and we all can be present with each other. And of course, these two functions also get hurt through trauma. That's why otherwise we wouldn't even talk about world peace. The reason why we talk about world peace is because it seems so hard to establish. But the disrelated parts of us are the reason for many of the symptoms, and the relational well-being or our relational training to be with each other, and especially to be with each other in difficult moments, is an amazing kind of support to reduce the after effects of trauma. That's why circles where we can relate to each other, where we listen to each other and we witness each other. Witness from, of course, through our eyes, but also witness through our hearts, which means be able to feel each other deeply when we listen to each other. That attunement, I feel you feeling me. I feel you and I feel how you feel me, are the basic building blocks of relating. And so when we, because that's called neuroception, and that's what creates safety. And I think if we can create safety with each other in resonant relationships, that's the beginning of creating safer spaces where we can begin to heal. And every time we create safe spaces where our nervous system can begin to release stress, pain, emotional pain, and begin to digest our ancestors or our collective past, these spaces are very valuable. So relational skills, presencing, mindfulness practices, as we heard before, inner spaciousness, inner regulation that leads to calmness, that leads to the capacity to spread presence around us. Presence is an ecosystemic function, same as stress is an ecosystemic function. So when somebody is very stressed, it's easy that the environment also becomes more stressed. But if somebody is very present and very compassionate and loving, then it can support the person that's stressed to be co-regulated and grounded. So that's why I think the work that everybody here is doing and that we are all passionate about practicing deeper are some of the core elements to help us individually, but also systemically to reduce the trauma load that we all carry. And I think one thing is also very important, that we destigmatize trauma. Trauma is not a shortcoming. Trauma is not a weakness. Trauma is not a dysfunction. These are very intelligent processes in us that we begin to understand better, that we can explore more. And as we are doing that, we can reduce that impact through a positive curiosity. And I think that's what we all can provide to create an ecosystem that destigmatizes trauma and helps many people and also ourselves to be less judgmental with ourselves, more curious, more compassionate towards ourselves. And that also helps us to come in touch with the trauma, the stored trauma in our bodies. So our bodies are important parts of the healing. Trauma is not just healing through talking about it, but really reducing the trauma load in our bodies, nervous systems, and emotions. And relational support is key in that practice.
Beautiful. So I want you all to remember two words: mirror neurons. In every one of our brains, we have mirror neurons, which reflect what we're experiencing in the world. So if somebody frowns at you, you may have an inclination to frown. If somebody smiles at you, you may have an inclination to smile. And what we should remember is that when we go out into the world and we smile, as Thomas has just shared with us, we change the world. And so I will tell you about a student. And Thomas, I would enjoy your reflections upon this experience. She was goth. Maybe you know goth, all black. Black mascara, black leather pants, black top. She was goth. And she scowled. She was angry at every person in the dormitory. And I shared the thought of mirror neurons with my students. And I said, if you just smile at somebody, they may not smile back, but you've loosened some muscles in their face. So the next person who smiles at them will probably evoke a smile. So one student went, and this lady, every time she smiled at this goth lady, who kind of looked at her with mean eyes and frowned. And after 2 weeks, the goth lady came to her and said, I want to thank you for seeing me. I share this story, and Thomas shares so many beautiful stories like this, by way of saying there is nobody on the planet, even the most difficult person in your life, who does not deserve compassion and respect. And Thomas has shared many stories about people like Putin, whose father found his mother under a bunch of dirt during the siege of Stalingrad. And so does Putin carry trauma? Yes. Should he be president of the USSR? I'm not sure. But he carries trauma. And so in each and every moral encounter, we can carry a smile, and we can bring those mirror neurons to bring a little more peace on the planet. Your reflections, Thomas.
I think what you said about the woman is an amazing example that we all of us can be somebody that sees someone. And feeling seen, I think many of us know that feeling seen by somebody deeply unseen means also felt. Feeling seen and felt in who we are, and also in our suffering, but also in our beauty and our potential and intelligence, is a deep healing process. And it opens our hearts, and it can open stagnations in our life, because for the first time we feel that somebody sees us after maybe many years of not feeling seen. And that's why having a social awareness, not having a self-awareness, of course, but also a deep spiritual practice, is that I'm not just this person, I'm also the ecosystem. I'm also like ecosystemically active and aware and attuned. And so that attunement to the environment that I'm operating in is an amazing contribution to the growth of that ecosystem. And the way I live, my honesty, my compassion, my love, my smiles, my transparency, walking my talk so that my words and my actions and my inner states say the same thing. This equals putting clean water into the ecosystem that I'm living in. When we are more dishonest, when we are not transparent about our life, when we are holding back, we are putting other qualities into this water. And I think we can all practice how do we create an ecosystem together, because we are the ecosystem that is more healthy. And then we all share, in a way, a healthier world, and we all co-create a healthier world. And I often say the extension of our immune system, as this long-term Harvard study also shows, is our relational network. If we can heal and improve our relationality, we all will live in a healthier world.
Beautiful.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Thank you, Thomas. And I want now, and I don't know if you can hear everybody here, but I want all of us to share with Thomas that we send peace to Israel, to all the victims, to Israelis, Palestinians, all the victims of violence. So I'm not quite sure how we can say this, but let's just say peace, 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 louder. Thomas, 3,000 people here in Monterrey, Mexico, send peace to our friends in Israel and to our friends in Palestine, and we wish you well in your work, and thank you for being with us this morning. So a round of applause, please.
Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with your conference, and it's a great contribution to the world. Thank you.
So the last regalo, gift, that we're going to give you today is, in 1999, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, at the Parliament of World Religions, and I met Nelson Mandela and the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and many others who have been here. And I learned a word. The word is Ubuntu. And you're about to see a clip, and I'm going to ask my friend Pato Bantan to come onto the stage. Pato and I are brothers. He got the more beautiful mother. And so it was several years later that I called Pato and I said, Pato, I have this vision of doing a documentary in Africa 12 nations, from Ethiopia to South Africa, from Kenya to Senegal, on the theme of Ubuntu, which I learned is the heart of Africa. And so if you carry away one word today, it would be the word Ubuntu. So come sit with me and let's watch the video.
Yeah. Can somebody say Ubuntu?
Ubuntu.
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 Saka wita panapa. Laona ndiyani kuna manya. Mese mnagona. Ayo ndiyani kuna manya fast chai. Simza imoko. Ani? Yona tani? Iwe? Wala shino kuna manya kuna mwenye panapa. Sure. Right. Ano number 1 pakumanya. Anopo basket rake. Gari 1, mabanana yenyu, orange, apple. Saka, tikutanga kubva panapa. Kumabva panapa svika kune muti uyo. Mombo. Hanzi. Saka vese vada kumhanya usanozvitemba ndoti muise line panapa. Yamirai muline so. Padhuze nepadhuze. Straight line. Saka ninda kutakura basket rangu iri. Ndanorisa uko. Pamwe pano mese kusvika hanzi. Anotanga kusvika ndiye anopiwa chii? Basket. Saka ninda kuenda ndakufana kutungamira.
When you realize your family is all of humanity, that's Ubuntu. When you want more peace and unity in your community, that's Ubuntu. When the love and respect I have for you is the same you have for me, that's Ubuntu. Tell all the people near and far, I am because we are, and that's Ubuntu. Listen again. The spirit of Ubuntu. Yeah, man. The spirit of Ubuntu. Yeah, man.
The world is facing numerous challenges today, such as wars, hunger, and diseases that are negatively impacting people around the globe. Despite the many solutions that have been tried without success, there seems to be only one solution: an old African practice that upholds the principle of Ubuntu. I am because we are. Pato Banton, aka Brother Friend, an internationally renowned reggae legend, and his wife, Antoinette Roosdoughter, a world-renowned reggae keyboard player and vocalist, venture on a mission from the United States of America to Africa. The duo were inspired by a friend to journey to Africa placed in order to document and share with the world how Ubuntu is practiced in 10 different African countries, as well as how this philosophy is an invitation globally in solving current and future world problems.
The spirit of Ubuntu.
So Pato, thank you so much. And are you going to share a song with us right now?
No, I'm not planning to share the song
No
till
song right now?
later this evening.
Okay, we're going to save it for this evening. So Pato, just in a couple of minutes, because I see Christina on the side with a large hook. So tell us, what was the experience like going to Africa and speaking to those 10 nations and to the people?
It was very beautiful. When we look at the news and the media, we are only presented with the problems of the world, killing, robbing, everything negative. But when we go into the world and meet people, individuals, organizations, we realize that there's much more good happening and much more positive things happening in the world than the negative things. And we learned, whether it was East Africa, West Africa, North Africa, South Africa, there are people out there practicing the spirit of Ubuntu. And, you know, Ubuntu means I am because we are. We are because I am. And we recognize that no one can be in this world as an individual. We need each other. And I believe that, you know, in Christianity, Jesus said that we must practice the golden rule, which is to treat people the way we want to be treated, you know. And in Eastern philosophy, they say namaste. And we went across Africa learning about Ubuntu, which means community. If I am up, then I have a responsibility to reach down and lift somebody else up. And when we recognize that we're all God's children, brothers and sisters, one family, when we recognize this, regardless of your color, your religion, your sex, no matter what it is, if we can all come together and recognize that there's one God, we're all God's children, one family, then we will start to walk towards peace.
Beautiful. And so, I want to thank my brother Pato and Antoinette for going to Africa. The documentary will be released in January, and we will be sending it to Christina. She will send it out to all of you. And I think we need to add one more gracias to this morning, which is to the greatest of all hosts, which is God. So gracias a Dios. Gracias a Dios. Gracias a Dios. Thank you, Pato.
Thank you so much, God.
Pues muy agradecidos, muy padre el panel y las enseñanzas, yo creo que nos llevamos. Me quedo yo con un mensaje que es una frase muy conocida, ¿no? Si queremos llegar rápido, viajemos solos, pero si queremos llegar lejos, viajemos juntos. Y yo creo que la comunidad de Monterrey y México queremos viajar muy lejos, entonces necesitamos estar más unidos que nunca. Gracias por su participación. Hoy por la tarde, al cierre del seminario, tenemos oportunidad de escuchar las melodías de Pato. Yo creo que va a ser al punto de las 6 de la tarde, un poquito antes. Tocará prácticamente cerrar el Encuentro Mundial de Valores en su 15ª edición a Pato. Así es que no se lo pierdan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would also like to ask Antoinette, can you stand up? please. Antoinette went to the Africa trip
Bravo.
also. Thank you.
Gracias, Javier. Pato.
Estamos transmitiendo desde el pabellón M y bueno, pues está esto que es el 15º Encuentro Mundial de Valores, donde estamos transmitiendo pues como cada año para todos ustedes a través de Canal 20.